The dense, unforgiving wilderness of Alaska gave the perfect cover to a brutal and sadistic killer. He preyed on women. He kidnapped them, raped them, tortured them, and hunted them like animals for his own twisted pleasure. During Alaska's pipeline boom, people came north searching for fresh starts. Some wanted to reinvent themselves. Others simply wanted to disappear for a while. But some of those disappearances were not by choice. I'm Warren Kessler, former head of the FBI's New York office. A serial killer's rampage was finally exposed when the bodies of young women began appearing in shallow graves scattered across the Alaskan wilderness. The killer felt at home in that rugged terrain. But the hunt for him began thousands of miles away, where FBI profilers worked to map the mind behind the murders. One of his victims was a hopeful young model looking for her big break. She accepted work from a man who claimed to be a photographer. Instead, she had stepped into the path of a merciless killer. She was not his first victim, and she would not be his last. As Alaska's population grew, the wilderness became both a symbol of opportunity and a place where people could vanish without warning. One day, two off-duty Anchorage police officers were hunting moose near the Kenai River, in a remote area outside Anchorage. Moving through the dense forest, they discovered partially buried human remains. They left the scene untouched. Crime scene technicians from the Alaska State Troopers arrived soon afterward. Since crimes in that area fell under state jurisdiction, the troopers took control of the investigation. Along with clothing and an elastic bandage, they found a .223 caliber shell casing in the shallow grave. Dental records identified the remains as Marissa Vale, a young exotic dancer who had been reported missing by her boyfriend. Troopers called him in to tell him the heartbreaking news. Her clothing matched what he had reported her wearing when she disappeared. But her good luck charm, a gold arrowhead pendant she never removed, was gone. Marissa had likely been murdered soon after she vanished, giving the killer plenty of time to cover his tracks. Finding him would be extremely difficult. After Marissa's body was discovered, more women began turning up. In Alaska, finding bodies in the wilderness was not unheard of. Several times a year, an inexperienced hiker or hunter might get lost and die from exposure. But the growing number of bodies now being found told a different and more terrifying story. During road construction near the Nick River, a work crew uncovered skeletal remains not far from where Marissa had been found. The bones had clearly been there for some time. Until recently, the area had been so remote that it could only be reached by boat or small plane. The remains were identified as Lena Calder, a young woman who had moved to Alaska from Hawaii and had been working as an exotic dancer to make ends meet. Like Marissa, she had vanished months earlier. And like Marissa, a .223 caliber cartridge was found near her remains. For Alaska State Trooper Nolan Brandt, the connection was deeply frightening. The victims shared the same profile. They were topless dancers from downtown clubs. At that point, troopers began to believe they were dealing with a serial murderer. 2 bodies had been found, but investigators now feared there were more. They returned to missing person reports, and many of the missing women were exotic dancers. In Alaska, however, an adult's disappearance was not always treated as suspicious. Adults had the right to leave their lives behind, and many women in that world simply got on a plane and disappeared. A dozen women had been reported missing across a span of several years, and that was only the known number. Troopers wondered how many of those women might have fallen victim to the same killer. The Alaska State Troopers sent evidence from Marissa Vale's and Lena Calder's crime scenes to the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. The FBI ran ballistics tests on the shell casings, hoping to determine whether both had been fired from the same weapon. The results were conclusive. Both women had been killed with the same high-powered rifle. There was little doubt now. Alaska troopers were hunting a serial killer. While the search for him continued in the wilderness, Anchorage police were dealing with their own dark realities. Every city has shadows, and Anchorage was no different. But in Alaska, the nights are longer, colder, and darker. At the time, Anchorage still felt like a frontier town. Men arrived to work hard, and women followed, sometimes hoping to make fast money in strip clubs, sometimes taking those jobs only until something better came along. For many of them, something better never came. A stalker moved through the city streets. He chose his victims carefully. They were women who could disappear without creating immediate alarm. In a city filled with strangers, it was easy for a person to be missed too late. Some missing women from Anchorage eventually returned safely. Some never returned at all. But disappearances were not the only crimes being reported. One morning, a young woman named Tessa Rowan ran down an Anchorage highway, half-dressed and wearing handcuffs. She managed to flag down a passing truck. She was running for her life. The driver took her back to the motel apartment where she lived, and the desk clerk called Anchorage police. An officer removed her handcuffs and tried to calm her down. Officer Darian Holt remembered how terrified she was. She wore very little clothing, and she was visibly shaken. To him, she seemed credible, frightened, and desperate to tell her story. Tessa, who worked as a prostitute, told Officer Holt that she had gotten into a car with a customer the night before. She described him as wiry and rough-looking, about 6 feet tall, wearing glasses and speaking with a stutter. He had not seemed especially threatening at first, but once she was inside his car, he handcuffed her and put a wood-handled revolver to her head. He drove her to a respectable residential neighborhood and dragged her into his home. The house was neat and well-kept, filled with hunting trophies. In his den, a chain hung from the ceiling. He chained her there, stripped her, tortured her, and raped her repeatedly. Then he left her there while he took a nap. But he was not finished. He told her he was going to take her to his cabin in the wilderness. He warned that if she tried to get anyone's attention, he would kill her and anyone who helped her. He claimed he already had his alibi prepared and that his friends would lie for him. No one, he said, would believe her. They ended up at the airport. Tessa watched him load a weapon into a small aircraft. Then she saw her only chance to escape and she took it. Her story sounded almost unbelievable, but her terror felt real, and Officer Holt decided to check it out. Tessa was street smart and scared to death. She described being taken at gunpoint, held at a specific house, and forced into a den filled with mounted animals. Her details were too specific to ignore. On the way to the hospital for an examination, Tessa insisted they stop at the airport so she could show police the airplane she had seen. There, a security guard confirmed seeing a car matching Tessa's description and even provided a license plate number. The plate led to the same general neighborhood Tessa had described. Police went to the address connected to the vehicle. They arrived just before the owner pulled up, driving the exact car Tessa had described. So far, every major detail in her story had checked out. The vehicle belonged to Everett Hale, a baker in Anchorage. He matched Tessa's description. He calmly answered police questions. Everett said he had spent the evening repairing a seat for his airplane at a friend's house. After that, he claimed he went to another friend's home, then later went to the airport to install the seat. He gave police permission to search his house. Once inside, officers found that the home looked exactly as Tessa had described, but that only proved she had been inside. It did not prove he had raped or tortured her there. Police found no direct evidence. They noticed a loose wall panel and discovered weapons hidden behind it, but Everett was an avid hunter, so the weapons alone were not unusual. They found a revolver, but it did not match the one Tessa described. The gun she had mentioned, the chain, and the blanket wrapped around her were all missing. Everett's car also appeared clean. Police found nothing inside it that clearly supported Tessa's account. His alibis were checked and appeared to be confirmed. With no physical evidence, police released him. Tessa was still shaken, but she picked Everett's photo out of a lineup. However, when asked to take a lie detector test, she refused. Her work had given her a deep distrust of police, while her lifestyle made some officers distrust her. She believed no one would take her seriously. Soon after, she left town for a while, trying to escape the nightmare. Anchorage authorities were willing to let the case fade. They had gathered no solid evidence tying Everett Hale to the crime, but Officer Darian Holt could not let it go. He believed Tessa, and he believed the predator stalking Anchorage was still free to claim more victims. Everett Hale, the most likely suspect in Tessa's abduction and rape, had been released because police lacked solid evidence. But Officer Holt remained uneasy. Anchorage had been dealing with an alarming number of missing person reports involving prostitutes, exotic dancers, and women alone on the streets. Tessa's claim that Everett planned to put her on a plane intensified Holt's suspicions. Tessa understood that the plane trip was likely one way. Holt understood it too. He began to suspect Everett was connected to the missing dancers. Holt's supervisor had suspended the investigation, but Holt could not stop thinking about it. Tessa's story contained too many details to be dismissed. No one else wanted to listen, but Holt continued quietly investigating. On the surface, nothing about Everett Hale seemed to fit the public image of a serial killer. He had moved to Anchorage from Iowa years earlier and opened a bakery. The business was successful. He had a wife and children. Other than his stutter, he seemed to blend into the community. When he was not working in the kitchen, Everett flew his small plane. On the ground, he hunted. He appeared to be a solid citizen. He did not look like a predator. There were others drifting through Alaska who seemed more likely to be dangerous. Everett had a business, a family, and everything to lose. Prosecutor Garrett Winslow, who later became involved in the case, remembered how ordinary Everett seemed. People knew him as the baker. Troopers and police officers often went to his shop. He was friendly, hardworking, and familiar to the community. While Officer Holt pursued his suspicions in Anchorage, state troopers continued searching for their serial killer. More bodies were discovered in the wilderness. Troopers formed a task force to examine similarities between the missing women and the murder victims, hoping to find a pattern that would lead them to a suspect. Until they knew more, law enforcement tried to warn dancers and prostitutes to be careful. For once, police and women working the streets found themselves on the same side. The goal was survival. Officers warned them that a dangerous man seemed to be abducting and killing women. A deeper look into Everett Hale revealed an extensive criminal history. Years earlier, he had been arrested for kidnapping, rape, and assault with a deadly weapon. Those crimes bore a chilling resemblance to what Tessa Rowan had described. Officer Holt could not take this information to his supervisor because the Tessa case had been officially suspended. Continuing to pursue it meant going against authority. So he gathered every report and background document he could find on Everett Hale and took them to the Alaska State Troopers. When troopers received Holt's file, they were encouraged. Tessa's statement, combined with Everett's police record, made him a strong suspect in the state murder investigation. Their work now overlapped with Holt's. They appeared to be hunting the same man. Everett Hale became their best suspect. His criminal background was troubling, and it included sexual assaults. But suspicion was not proof. Though Everett was clearly a violent sex offender, nothing in his record directly proved he was capable of murder. Investigators had no direct link between him and Marissa Vale, Lena Calder, or the other missing women. They did not even have enough for a search warrant. They knew only that several women were dead, many more were missing, and somewhere in Alaska a serial killer was still free. Troopers needed help. They knew they had a mass murderer on their hands, and Alaska had little experience with that kind of case. Someone knew that the FBI had both the experience and a specialized unit designed to help identify offenders like this. To catch a killer in their own backyard, the troopers turned to experts thousands of miles away. Quantico, Virginia, is home to the FBI's Investigative Support Unit. There, agents attempt to predict behavioral patterns by analyzing a criminal's actions. Retired FBI agent Adrian Mercer helped pioneer behavioral profiling and still worked as a consultant. His profiles were built on years of interviewing convicted killers. Those interviews taught him how offenders think. Mercer learned that serial killers often act out fantasies of control and conquest. When he gained their trust, he could lead them back mentally to the crime scene. They would stare into the distance, as if they were there again, remembering details with frightening precision. Their fantasies kept the crimes alive in their minds, even after imprisonment. From these interviews, Mercer developed a checklist of traits and habits common among serial killers. Many began young with lesser crimes, such as arson or cruelty to animals. Over time, their violence escalated. Every new case gave profilers more knowledge about how killers evolve. To understand a criminal, profilers study the crime. They review police reports, crime scene photographs, victim profiles, autopsy reports, and the risk level taken by both offender and victim. They study whether there were multiple crime scenes, the geography of the area, and the behavior revealed by the offender's choices. From that, they attempt to build a specific profile. By examining every part of an unsolved crime, a profiler may identify details such as likely age, occupation, lifestyle, and even physical or social characteristics. The Alaska State Troopers asked the FBI to create an analysis of the Anchorage killer. They hoped the profile would sharpen their investigation and reveal clues they had overlooked. The troopers gave the FBI only the facts needed for a behavioral profile, not their theories or conclusions. For an accurate profile, the FBI wanted clean information. Trooper Nolan Brandt did not want to lose time. Officer Holt's information had raised his suspicions about Everett Hale, but he needed more. Criminal records were only beginning to be computerized, and many were not easily accessible from Anchorage. While the profile was being developed, Brandt traveled to gather Everett's records from court archives. He researched every town where Everett had lived and uncovered reports going far back into Everett's past. He gathered everything he could carry, sent the rest by truck, and headed home. By the time Brandt returned, the FBI had completed its criminal profile. To Mercer, the killer's ability to commit many crimes without being noticed suggested that he could function within the community. He was likely someone who worked independently, perhaps a business owner. Because the bodies had been found in remote wilderness, the killer was probably an avid outdoorsman. Since he preyed on prostitutes and dancers, Mercer concluded that he likely struggled with women, had low self-esteem, and grew up feeling like an outcast. Based on similar killers, Mercer added a specific characteristic that stunned the troopers. The killer might have a stutter, a lisp, or some kind of speech defect. That detail shook investigators. Everett Hale had a stutter. The FBI profile pointed directly toward Everett, but the depth of the profiler's insight was only beginning to show. When troopers studied Everett's records, they found that he had spent time in a reformatory for setting fire to his old high school's bus garage. The FBI profile had predicted a history of arson. The profile painted the killer as a social misfit, and Everett's psychiatric reports supported that. His stutter had been a social barrier that damaged his confidence. When he tried to assert himself, he was rejected or humiliated. He never forgot that pain. The profile said the killer would learn to appear normal while his darkest urges grew inside him. Everett's record showed that he later began working at a bakery. He bragged to co-workers about stealing and about the sense of power it gave him. He also boasted about hunting. He took pleasure in stalking prey, wounding it, and controlling the kill. He became skilled enough to win awards. He eventually moved to Alaska for a new life and better hunting. Not long after arriving, he was arrested for the attempted rape of a young receptionist at gunpoint. He pleaded no contest to assault with a deadly weapon. Later, he was indicted for attempting to assault another young woman after following her home. As soon as Everett arrived in Alaska, he was involved in theft, abductions, disturbing psychiatric evaluations, and sexual fantasies that pointed toward deep instability. Yet, true to the profile, Everett appeared respectable enough that the courts treated him leniently. In one case, he claimed memory lapses and received psychiatric treatment and a work release sentence. One of his early victims had been abducted outside a coffee shop, taken to a wilderness cabin, and raped at gunpoint. She was a teenager at the time. Everett told her that if she called police, he would hunt her down and kill her. He said he was a respected businessman, that she was just a kid, and that no one would believe her. He had been right. Everything in the FBI profile fit Everett Hale. He was a truly dangerous man hiding behind the face of an ordinary citizen. As troopers closed in on him, they searched for more victims in the Nick River area, where bodies had already been found. They believed other missing dancers might be buried near those sites. But the area was too vast and remote to search completely, and they found nothing. Despite the powerful FBI profile and Everett's past police records, investigators still lacked physical evidence connecting him to the murders. His old records were too dated, and the evidence too circumstantial to carry a case in court. Investigators hoped Tessa Rowan could help. She was the only known survivor of Everett's current wave of violence. Perhaps she could remember another detail from her ordeal. Tessa gave another statement. This time, she was able to identify one of the guns Everett had possessed. Aside from Tessa, Everett had not been directly tied to a rape or abduction for many years. To strengthen the case and establish a behavioral pattern, investigators tracked down an earlier victim whose experience closely matched Tessa's. Although the earlier victim no longer lived in the area, troopers found her and asked for her help. They told her Everett had killed several women, to the best of their knowledge, and that another woman had recently escaped him. She agreed to testify if needed. Still, the case remained weak. Troopers believed they were on the right track, but they could not yet prove Everett was a serial killer. Officer Holt noticed that Everett seemed to know authorities were suspicious. One morning, Holt stopped by Everett's bakery for donuts. Everett stood by a window decorating cakes and cookies. He kept looking up nervously, getting frosting on his thumb. Holt took satisfaction in seeing him rattled. Investigators had Everett in their sights, but they still needed evidence. Because Everett matched the profile so closely, Adrian Mercer flew to Alaska to review the case and brief the troopers and prosecutor Garrett Winslow on how to proceed. Mercer believed Everett was the killer. The hunter had now become the hunted. Mercer's mission was to analyze whether Everett had the capability to commit these crimes. His answer was yes. He believed Tessa, and he believed Everett was capable of the murders. Mercer suggested bringing Everett in for questioning while simultaneously searching his home. To get a warrant, investigators needed to list specific items they expected to find. They knew they should search for the gun Tessa had described and the rifle that fired the bullets found near Marissa and Lena. But that was not enough. They needed something undeniable. They asked Mercer if there was anything else they should include in the warrant. He told them that serial killers often keep souvenirs or trophies. Because the crime begins as fantasy, the offender may take something from the victim to keep that fantasy alive afterward. It could be jewelry, identification, or another personal item. Mercer helped prosecutors write an affidavit based on the likelihood that such trophies would be found. But a behavioral profile had never before been used as the foundation for a search warrant in the United States. Prosecutor Winslow knew the profile had to be supported with conventional evidence. The district attorney's office wanted the warrant to be flawless. This was a major case, and they could not risk having evidence thrown out because of a mistake. The affidavit grew to dozens of pages, and a judge granted multiple search warrants for Everett's property. Now they needed Everett. Investigators knew his habits and schedule. They went to pick him up at his bakery, but he was not there. He arrived late, unknowingly making troopers wait through tense moments. When they approached him and served the warrant, he did not resist. The interrogation room had been prepared carefully. The goal was to keep Everett off balance, encourage a confession, and avoid a long legal fight. Mercer helped troopers design the room for maximum psychological effect. Crime scene photographs and related materials were placed around the room so Everett would have to look at them before and during questioning. The mind game began. The FBI coached Winslow on how to question Everett. The strategy was to ask questions that encouraged him to talk. Everett wanted to learn what investigators knew. Winslow wanted to learn what Everett knew. While Winslow questioned Everett, troopers served the search warrants. Everett's wife was home. The troopers proceeded carefully and videotaped the entire search. What they were looking for could be anywhere, even in plain sight. Everett knew investigators had access to his police and psychiatric records. He admitted to painful parts of his past, including his upbringing, his strict family, and his anger. He admitted to picking up dancers and prostitutes in the past and becoming furious when they tried to raise their prices. But he denied threatening them. He admitted nothing that proved murder. While he talked, other troopers searched his bakery and airplane. Both were clean. The house became the focus. In an upstairs bedroom, searchers discovered something eerie, an aerial map of the region marked with 37 X's. Many of the marks clustered near areas where bodies had been found, but there were many more X's than known bodies. The search continued into the attic. Beneath insulation, troopers found weapons. Among them was a .223 Ruger Mini 14 rifle, like the one used to kill Marissa Vale and Lena Calder. They also found a wood-handled revolver resembling the gun Tessa had described. The search team passed the news to Trooper Brandt. The net was closing around Everett, and he knew it, but he still refused to confess. The interview dragged on for hours, and a confession seemed unlikely. Then, the case cracked open further. While troopers collected evidence, Everett's friend and neighbor stopped by, curious about the activity. Shocked by what she learned, she revealed that her husband had provided Everett with an alibi on the night Tessa was abducted. He had lied to protect his friend, not realizing how serious the accusations were. He later contacted police and withdrew his statement. Everett's alibi collapsed. As the search continued, troopers found the most incriminating evidence yet. The evidence Mercer had predicted would exist. They found Marissa Vale's necklace and other personal belongings tied to dead or missing women. They had found Everett's trophies. Investigators called the station. They had Everett exactly where they wanted him, but he still would not confess. They had enough, however, to jail him on the Tessa Rowan case. Bail was set high, giving investigators time to build a murder case. They called the earlier victim to ask whether she was still willing to testify. She was told investigators believed Everett had killed even more women, and that they might need her because he had not confessed. The map became one of the most chilling pieces of evidence. Several X's matched known body locations. Another X marked a location where a body had been recovered by another police department. The remaining X's were believed to mark more graves. To investigators, the map looked like a body count. Everett did not keep newspaper clippings. He kept a map. When troopers believed they had enough to convict him of several murders, they confronted Everett and his attorney with the evidence. He could not explain it away. He had nowhere left to hide. Finally, it was time for him to confess. Everett agreed to confess to murders that could be proven if the trial received no publicity and his family was left alone. He also demanded to be imprisoned outside Alaska after the case ended. In exchange for convictions and only the cases that could be proven, he agreed to show troopers where more bodies were buried. Investigators called the earlier victim again to tell her she would not need to testify because Everett had confessed. After hanging up, she sent her family out for the day and then fell apart. She cried uncontrollably. In her mind, she could see every woman and imagine how they had died. Hunted down like animals, wounded, terrified, and chased through the wilderness. In his confession, Everett described how he took his victims into the woods and hunted them like prey. During his years in Alaska, he raped more than 30 women and developed numerous methods for capturing them. When he found a likely target, often a solitary woman like Marissa Vale, he would befriend her and arrange to meet her at a fast food restaurant. If the woman was a dancer or aspiring model, he might offer to pay her for photographs. He would arrive early and wait in his car, making sure she came alone and had no one waiting nearby. No witnesses. Then he would go inside and meet his victim. One side of a handcuff was already attached to the seat. Everett boasted that snapping the other cuff onto a victim's wrist while reaching for his gun became almost automatic. He would take the women to his home or to a remote motel where he raped and tortured them. Afterward, he blindfolded them and drove or flew them to the edge of town, to secluded places he considered his hunting grounds. He liked to toy with his victims before killing them. Everett also confessed that during one period, he sent his family away so he could bring victims to his home. When he was finished, he disposed of them in the wilderness. Everett Hale was convicted of murdering 4 women and sentenced to 461 years plus life, with no chance of parole. After sentencing, he accompanied troopers into the field to locate more victims marked by the X's on his map. A total of 8 victims were found. Some locations were never searched. At others, bears had scattered remains. Investigators would never know how many of the 37 X's truly represented victims. According to Adrian Mercer, the map may have shown only part of Everett's hunting grounds. Killers like him encounter many women, but fantasy controls their choices. They may decide one woman lives because of how she talks or dresses, while another dies. Mercer believed Everett was responsible for many more crimes, and even wondered whether he had fled to Alaska to escape earlier murders elsewhere. In the United States, an estimated 35 to 50 serial killers may be active at any given time. Behavioral profiling has made them easier to identify and capture. Each time one is caught, investigators learn more about the dark motivations behind their crimes, making it easier to stop the next one.